r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. What restaurant do you refuse to eat at and why? Chili's. I went a few years ago with my mom and made the horrible decision to get a side of chili lime rice. I ate maybe 3 bites because it didn't taste good. Those 3 bites didn't seem to get along well with my body at all. Unfortunately, Chili's was the first stop before hitting the store to do our weekly grocery shopping. At the store, I had to make a run for the bathroom twice. After we finally checked out, my mom made a suggestion that maybe I should make another stop there before we drove home since it would take at least 20 minutes. I declined even though my stomach was turning, thinking I could make it home and would rather use that toilet than a public one. Big mistake. About 5 minutes into the drive home, I realized that I needed to get to a toilet or I would ruin my mom's car forever. After telling her this, she tells me there's nowhere to stop yet since we were in a residential area. I ask if we can stop at a family friend's house which is close by, and she agrees. She tells me to give them a call so they can unlock the door and save me a few seconds. I explain to her that if I move to grab my phone from my pocket, her car interior would be ruined. The 5-minute drive there feels like forever and I'm clenching my ass for dear life. We finally get there and I bolt up the porch stairs to knock on their door. No answer. At this point, I'm desperate. I knock again and finally hear someone coming. Right as the door opens, my ass muscles give out. The friends stare at me as I spew liquid shit all over their porch. I'm just standing there still making a mess everywhere and the husband grabs a hose to start spraying me and his porch down. I'm so glad I read all of this. Any self-serve buffet. Kids are nasty and not all parents watch their kids. Saw a kid lick a serving spoon and put it back. Glad I caught it, but imagine how often it isn't caught. This is the #1 reason I refuse to eat at buffets. We used to go a long time ago. Went when our own kids were young. But they weren't allowed to go up by themselves and we explained that they have to point things out and use their words because it would be gross to touch the food because the food is for everyone. They totally understood. But we saw kids licking spoons, putting their fingers in food. One time, this kid goes up to the dessert bar and grabs 2 parfait cups full of jello and covered in whipped cream. He picked them up by putting his fingers in the top and gripping the cups. So, his fingers are in the whipped cream and jello. He starts walking to the table and his dad is shaking his head and telling him no. He tells him to put the cups back. The kid does. I was so grossed out. Someone at those desserts, having no idea that some kid had his fingers in them. The sad thing is, we saw adults who were just as bad, sneezing, coughing, lifting spoonfuls of food to their nose to smell it and then putting it back. I don't want food that someone sniffed all over. One time we were at this fancy brunch buffet we sometimes went to and we saw a family take an entire platter of cookies and small cakes to their table and eat it. Like, those were for everyone, but they just picked up the giant platter and took it. We haven't been to a buffet in at least a decade. I don't trust people. 7 or 8 years ago, I was at a big medical trade show in Anaheim, CA, and after a day of hanging out in the vendor booth, I decided to have dinner at Bubba Gump Shrimp. About 4 or 5 hours after eating there, I came down with the nastiest case of food poisoning I have ever experienced. Alone in a hotel room after hours of throwing up, I called an ambulance, which I couldn't afford but was desperate for help. The doctor at the hospital thought shellfish fit the profile. For some reason can still eat shrimp, but never again at Bubba Gump. This has happened to me at Outback Steakhouse, though I probably shouldn't have ordered steak and lobster when they have a promo for $20. My dad placed a family boycott on Chili's because they had terrible service once and refused our never used gift cards. About 15 or so years later my dad was forced into going to Chili's while on a business trip and put an end to the boycott. Then he spilled ketchup on his pants and announced the boycott was back on. In my 22 years I think I've been to Chili's 3 times. And there is one down the road from me. The boycott was back on. Your pops is a funny man. There is a local Mediterranean all-you-can-eat place that I have never eaten at and refuse to try. But not for the reason you probably think. It was in a weirdly dingy, Broken down building that never has anybody parked out front and has almost never had anybody in it. This place is surrounded on all sides by significantly nicer restaurants and businesses, which just makes it stand out even more. Here's the real kicker for why I don't go in. This place is near where I work, so I have literally seen it every day. In the 7 years I've known of its existence, almost every restaurant around it has folded and gone out of business at least once before coming back as something else. Yet this place has somehow survived despite having no obvious signs of doing business. I believe it's a money laundering front. My suspicions have doubled since last year when the building they were in got a suddenly an upgrade and renovated the building to be much nicer than every building around it. Again, this is at a place where I think I have maybe seen a dozen people parked outside of. Ever. Yeah. Around here. It's the Chinese restaurant. Completely surrounded by vacant buildings. Empty parking lot. But still there. Someone new to the town ate there once. Said the food wasn't that good. And that they had the feeling that the staff wanted them out of the restaurant as soon as possible. And not in the I don't wanna do any work sort of way. Golden Corral. We've got a family joke where if someone recommends a restaurant we wait until later in the conversation and ask if they like Golden Corral. If they say yes, we never try the place they recommended. The worst part is the chocolate fountain. Public chocolate fountains should be illegal. My dad refuses to eat at Papa Murphy's because when I was in high school I applied there, had an interview, and was told I was hired and that they would contact me with starting info. Then never contacted me. Lucky you. Not any in particular, but there was one case worthy of bringing up. Was on the road from the airport to our lodgings in Jacksonville area. Wife wanted to eat, so we saw Denny's and stopped. I went into the bathroom to freshen up. While doing my business, I noticed the 2 stalls were occupied. No big deal. I finish up just as the one guy leaves. In the mirror I see him, with the cook's apron on. Didn't stop to wash his hands. I got out and immediately got my wife to leave with me. That was also the plot of a Seinfeld episode. Golden Corral. Possibly the grossest and saddest restaurant I ever ate at. Not to mention the prices were astronomical for such subpar food. My grandfather was known for overstatement. If he enjoyed something, it was the greatest thing ever. If someone was intelligent, they were the smartest person ever. You get the idea. So one day, he was telling me about this restaurant in town that he and his wife had tried. And it had the best food ever. I asked where, expecting that maybe it was a new joint that even if it wasn't the best, was probably worth checking out. His answer: Golden Corral. Okay. Grandpa. That was one recommendation of his I didn't take. I'll preface this by saying I absolutely love sushi. Or loved. For a time. Over a year ago now. I went out for sushi with my so and some friends one Friday night at a local place we just discovered and thought, wow. This place ain't bad. Might be a regular place to go to now. In the 12 hours that followed were the most harrowing my bowels had ever experienced. I was being punched out of my butt. Then proceeded to puke for about 20 minutes straight. Between this diarrhea-fueled anger my body was going through and the exorcist vomiting that followed, I had the maddest chills and could not stop shaking. Once the demon was expelled from me, my so went through the exact same thing. She knew what I had just gone through was exactly what she was going to go through. And her clock was ticking. So our Friday night was us both agonizingly punishing our toilet until daylight. And the rest of that weekend was spent eating nothing but crackers and toast and drinking water in our house coats. The friends we were with went through the exact same thing that weekend. So it wasn't a one-off or anything like that. Last I checked, the place is now closed. No doubt from other patrons going through what we all did. So yeah, that place. I still, to this day, cannot eat sushi. It sucks. This Nepalese family bought a pizza joint near my house and does both the old menu and sushi and Chinese food. The guy who owns it used to be the sushi roller at one of the better sushi spots in town. So I figured I'd give it a try. Now that it's his own place, he just doesn't care at all. I literally saw him roll a roll, set it aside to roll the next one, and have the whole thing roll off the cutting board into the trash. He fished it out, dusted it off, cut it up and put it in the takeout box, and sent it out. I decided to switch to a calzone. While I'm waiting, he goes to cook something with chicken. He seasons the chicken on one cutting board, sautés it, then puts it right back on the same bloody cutting board he seasoned it on to cut it up. In Canada, any national pizza chain if I can help it, ingredient quality just sucks balls when you need distribution like that. It's okay. You can say Boston Pizza out loud. Applebee's. My grandparents used to force our whole family to go there at every family get together. It's just overpriced TV dinners. Half the menu isn't even edible. A quesadilla burger makes no sense. You can't even hold it. Damn millennials. Why don't you eat at our shitty chain restaurants? I've told this before, but I'll do it again for shits and giggles. I will never eat at Arby's again. Once upon a time, at a Treasure Coast, Florida Arby's, I decide I'm hungry and snag myself a nice, messy barbecue sandwich. Every time I ate them, I always lamented how they'd be better with a slightly toasted bun. Well, I make my order, pay, sit down and take a bite. My fervorous hunger is rewarded by a resounding crunch. They toasted my bun while still chewing. I pull my burger away and look it over. There is not a slight bit of tanning in bun, and now that I hold it and analyze it, it doesn't feel remotely stiff like a toasted bun would. As I sat there, food still in my mouth, a wave of horror came over me and prompted me to uncap the bun. I saw the largest palmetto bug I'd seen in quite some time, or half of it at least. Now, I'm a good person. At least I feel I can be more often than not. But at that moment of mind duckery mixed in with a serving of disgust and a side of why me, I snapped. I rushed towards the cashier stations and winged the burger at the closest wall barrier I could see. Spat the food all over their floors and cussed them up one side and down the other. Never again. I started screeching loudly as I read palmetto bug. Tim Hortons. Every single time I went it was a letdown. The food quality has been declining for years and their coffee tastes like it's been pumped right out of the sewers. Also, they treat their employees like absolute shit, and their franchise owners have been known to throw childish tantrums over the slightest wage increases. As a Canadian, Tim Hortons used to be something to be happy about. Now it's a ducking national embarrassment. Most, not all I'd argue, food is cardboard crap. And the coffee is just disgusting. It's completely watered down and gives you stomach cramps or worse. For quick coffee, I switched to McDonald's, which is far superior and better in quality in every way. People sometimes question how McDonald's coffee is better when I tell them, but when they try it they agree it's way better. Red Lobster. Used to love it as a kid, and I was able to convince my husband to go for Shrimp Fest. We order all sorts of shrimp dishes, and when the food came out, we both laughed out loud. It was the worst looking shrimp I had ever seen. The popcorn shrimp was balls of breeding, with a shrimp the size of my pinky nail on a plate. That's it. 10 tiny fried balls on a plate. The shrimp scampi was melted butter with equally tiny shrimp floating in it. Nothing had any flavor at all. The waiter asked us if we wanted seconds of anything. We didn't even eat what we had. Never again. Subway. I know it's probably perfectly fine, but the lighting and the layout make it look so dirty and unhygienic. The kind of dull lighting with yellowing floors. P.S. I don't know where I found this. I believe it belongs to you/Hodo 12. AutoZone. It's not a restaurant, but duck them. Never eating there again. Any sandwich restaurants, shops. Subway at the top of the list. I used to work part-time at a convenience store that shared space with a Subway, and every shift they made rolls. Those stinky, rising, yeasty smelling, baking, nasty ass rolls. I just grew a hate for Subway since. Not to mention the amount of meats per sandwich is less than par. They have an awesome business and a dedicated crowd. But to each their own. Nando's. Ever since pretty much every local Asian takeaway started selling piri piri chickens, so many around now at half the price Nando's are. I've been well aware of the hype around Nando's, but until last year had never been. I went 3 times. Every time with friends. And every time found myself wondering what the duck everyone was going on about. It was bog standard chicken, lukewarm cheap mash, overcooked sweet corn, and for a surprisingly large amount of money given the portion sizes. I really don't understand the popularity. Ducking, like and subscribe.